Our story begins not at the beginning, but rather at the end, as we meet Himmel the hero and his party that just got back from slaying the Demon King. Amongst this group of a drunk priest named Hyder and a dwarf warrior named Sein is an elven mage named Frieren, who has lived her life rather apathetically up to this point. As a being who's been alive for more than 1,000 years and still has many more thousands to go, she doesn't think much of this mere 10-year journey, as she calls it. Which is understandable. As an elf, she doesn't understand human emotion, and her concept of time is so different compared to ours due to their expanded lifespans. However, this all changes for Frieren when decades later, Himmel meets his natural death. Frieren feels a way she's never felt before. Or at least she hasn't felt in a very long time. She feels sadness. She's regretful that she never took the time to truly understand Himmel. She's confused about why, as a being who still has a millennium to live, these short 10 years hold such a weight on her heart. And now all that's left are memories. She'll never get that time with Himmel again. After Himmel's funeral, Frieren decides to dedicate the rest of her journey to trying to understand humans and their emotions, in hopes she can understand Himmel and her feelings towards him better. Years after Himmel's death, Frieren just so happens to be in the area where her old friend Hyder is staying, who has taken up an apprentice mage by the name of Fern. However, Hyder is on his last legs and won't be able to take care of Fern anymore. After some manipulation and Frieren seeing potential in Fern as a mage, Frieren takes her in as her apprentice. A human, keep in mind. Remember this. It's also important to note that she gets another party member by the name of Stark, who was Eisen's apprentice. Again, another human. I'll talk more about these characters individually in my character section, but for now, I want to talk about Frieren's journey needing an end goal. After reading the notes left behind by her master Flamme, it sounds weird without a German accent. I'm sorry. Flamme?
Flamme.
There's this place called Ariel, where you can speak to the souls of the dead. Frieren wishes to go there so she can speak with Himmel, so she can make up for all the time she took for granted when he was actually alive. But the path to Ariel is the same path to the Demon King that Himmel and the old party took all those years ago. So Frieren must retrace her steps and go through the 10-year-long journey again. A common theme in Frieren is the concept of time. Obviously, experiencing grief and loss is part of it with Frieren, but it goes so much deeper than just that. Frieren is a character who is frozen in time. As she stays put, the world changes around her. And yes, I did do that on purpose. Her name means frozen in German for a reason. Magic that was once considered a demonic art is now widespread, being used by humans all over the planet. The killing magic Zortrak, which was once a feared human-piercing spell, is now considered just normal offensive magic. Older magicians who actually lived through the era where it was used by demons hesitate to use it for a brief moment. But newer magicians, such as Fern, have used it for pretty much their entire lives. She doesn't even think of it as a demonic spell. Even smaller things, such as food changing over time, or the sweet that Stark ate as a kid appearing smaller than he remembered, to cities eventually changing and modernizing compared to what we see in Frieren's flashbacks. All of this is meant to convey that we change so much in such a small amount of time, when you think about it in the grand scheme of things. And to Frieren, this is all new to her because the world changed in the blink of her eye. As far as the sheer amount of montages and time skips go, which in most cases would bother me, but in Frieren they fit with the messaging so well that I completely understand their purpose. They showcase so beautifully how time can move for Frieren. Again, when you're an elf, days become hours, months become days, and years become months until eventually even a decade feels like a short amount of time. And as the old saying goes, time flies when you're having a blast. So the montages are there to convey that theme. The montages also serve the purpose of showing character, even during life's less eventful moments. Himmel the hero was a very in-the-now person. He knew he was on an important journey to save the world, but much to the dismay of Eisen, he never took for granted the joy he felt when he was mindlessly exploring dungeons with a group or helping a village with farm work, because he knew that this time was limited. So it's wonderful to me that almost 3 decades after his passing, Frieren learns to appreciate this time with her companions more. She's aware that their time is limited, but she still wants to live her life in the present, making memories with other people and helping others. This also relates to the conflict between Siri and Flamme and how they view magic differently. To Siri, magic is a tool and her trainees are all combat oriented, something that should be reserved for people with special talents. While Flamme's block treats magic as a delicacy. Learning spells Siri would call useless so that they can have an impact on people in the present, so it can create cherished memories such as the Field of Flowers. It's very interesting to me that of all the backstories we see on this journey with Himmel and the others, did we see the battle with the Demon King once? Hell, we rarely saw memories of battles in general. It's because the moments that stuck with Frieren the most are the little moments. The times she and the group were just hanging out. She says herself that the reason she still collects useless spells is because Himmel once complimented it. Even Fern's reason was because she showed butterflies to Hyder once. Hell, even Siri, who shares the belief that magic is more of a tool, she remembers each and every one of them and their favorite spells, and she even has a smile on her face when talking about Flamme. Hell, in the Word, we see magic getting used for farming crops and helping with stores. Even one of the side characters uses his magic as a repair shop. Characters like Warbel, who was a soldier in the north, a man you'd expect to see magic as a killing tool and that's it. Yet even he was inspired by Himmel's stories where he would just help people. To him, magic should be used to help others, even in small ways. It's all an interesting narrative to me, one you don't really see fantasy anime go down very often. Once the Demon King was gone and all the dungeons had been cleared by Himmel, humans adapted and started using magic for convenience. And might I add, most of this information about the story I just talked to you about is shown to us. Frieren is incredible at showing us information. This has to do with Madhouse as well because the facial expressions a lot of these characters show tell the story as well. There are so many details I probably missed in this show because there's so much subtle stuff happening that upon one viewing, it'd be hard to notice. I didn't notice Arei's grandpa was Lenren until I saw a Reddit post about it. Nor did I notice Lenren was the character who noticed the Holy Emblem, which allowed Frieren to participate in the magic exam in the first place. That's just 2 examples, and not even from a main character. The story is also paced very well. It is episodic at times, which may turn some people away, but once it gets to the Ore arc, it's just up from there. I like how each arc takes its time and simmers. In a show with so many time skips and fast-paced montages, the sudden shift just makes these arcs feel more important to me. I wasn't all that into the magic exam arc at first. I thought it was a little cliche, but when they began that second test, I got into it. It really built my love for a lot of characters in such a short amount of time. This is a small thing, but at the start of the show, the episodes were actually 26 minutes rather than the traditional 24. It allowed Madhouse a little more time to make sure scenes hit at the beginning when it was necessary. I also liked how the power system of magic is less about how much pure mana you can generate and more about how a mage utilizes their mana and spells. It reminded me of Nen from Hunter x Hunter, where battles become glorified rock, paper, scissors games where anyone can truly win. A character like Yubel can defeat some of the strongest characters in the world simply because she's a matchup nightmare despite not being a very high-ranked mage. Fern isn't a mage who knows a ton of different spells, but her control of her mana, mixed in with the fact she can overwhelm her opponents with quantity, makes her a formidable opponent that even Frieren admits could defeat her, despite having less mana, as well as having the ability to almost completely conceal her presence, so she can surprise opponents better than anybody in the show. Magic is a pretty basic idea for fantasy anime, but how you can morph the basic idea of magic can turn it into a pretty interesting power dynamic for the show. One thing about the world building I want to see more of is the demon, who played the main antagonist of the show pretty much. I actually like the fact there were a bunch of heartless manipulators who only developed talking to prey on humans. It's very similar to the Wendigo, but Frieren takes this concept further by creating demons who can politically maneuver their way into positions of power. This shows clear progress for them as a species, that while humans are developing, demons are developing as well. Humans are emotional, they can be toyed with, just like demons can be manipulated by having them underestimate you. But outside of that vague comparison, they are completely different creatures, which I actually do like the fact they're just plain evil. I just want to see more interesting characters out of this race. Lugna and Aura are okay, but there wasn't a notable character from the demons that pulled me in yet. That could come in the future though. Overall, Frieren's story is incredible to me. Some may say it's slow paced at the start, but there's such a relatable and much needed message that's there. Even as someone younger who hasn't experienced much, I still feel Frieren because I have had similar regrets about not opening up to people. People I wish I spent more time with but are now out of my life. And entering adulthood, I'm trying to get over those regrets by creating new friendships. Oddly, just like Frieren. I haven't experienced anything as hard-hitting as the death of a loved one yet, but I'm trying to spend more time with the people I love so that when the time comes, I won't have any regrets like Frieren did. Frieren is a somber reminder of how fleeting time truly is. How even a being that's over 1,000 years old can regret not having enough time with someone. And just overall how impactful a human life can be on not just individual people, but the world at large. Think about the two most impactful people in the world of Frieren, and they're both humans, despite elves existing and having a much larger lifespan. This is something that Siri brings up towards the end of the show. Even in that fleeting time, they were able to usher in a new era of magic and peace, one that the elves have been complacent in because they have all the time in the world. There are a lot of shows that talk about a being slowly becoming more human, and I usually love these kind of shows, and Frieren is just another example of one that really hit me. There aren't moments that'll make you bawl your eyes out or anything, but it maintains this bittersweet, melancholic feeling of time slowly ticking away on this journey. But hopefully, in the end, we can look back on it and smile. Smile at all the memories we made, and even if it's gone now, we will see each other again in the future. That's the true beauty of Frieren, and that's why I think this story is incredible. All of this I've said so far, and I still haven't even talked about the characters or production yet. Are you kidding me? This is a long one, boys. There are a lot of characters in Frieren. The main cast, the old hero party, the magic exam, to extreme side characters that were so enjoyable in their limited time that they deserve a mention as well. Frieren does an incredible job developing a memorable, wide variety cast of characters that are each so unique to each other, but also have their own separate stories to tell. This is going to sound absolutely wild out of context, but it's almost like Monster in this regard, where it feels like every character has a story and a connection to the overarching themes in the show. There isn't one character that feels like filler or just a character to have for a comedic reason or something like that. Every member of the cast has their own story, just like Frieren and the others. From characters who are very popular like Yubel to characters that appear like twice in the show such as Kraft. And this helps Frieren have a well-developed cast, despite the large amount of characters and the little screen time some may have. A good example of a character who appears once, yet beautifully fits the show's themes is Ordell, a royal who last told his son that he never wanted to see his face again before his death, and has been regretting that moment ever since. This dude appears for like, maybe 15 minutes, and yet I can understand where he's coming from. Exactly. I get why he's having so much trouble telling the truth about his son's death. He never wanted his time to end like that. It relates to appreciating your time with your loved one. Again, just one example of a super minor character, but a great character nonetheless, who fits the themes of the show. Or what about a character like Old Man Vol, a victim of time, who suffers from amnesia to the point he doesn't even remember his lover's face, yet he still fights to protect her home. There are just so many examples of one-off characters having relatable or understandable motives, and they all have to do with time and appreciating your loved one. I talked a fair bit about Frieren's character when talking about the story, so I'll try to keep this section brief, but as the main character, I really enjoyed following her. On the outside, she's an apathetic, wise old mage, so it was fun to see this sillier side of her. She struggles to take care of herself and waking up early, because as an elf you don't have to worry about keeping track of your time like humans do, or her habit of falling into mimics or collecting Flamme's old records, despite knowing most are fake. On the off chance that the mimic contains a grimoire, she takes that chance no matter what. It's minor, but that side of her was consistently entertaining to me. I really liked how that hero's party in general was just a bunch of goofballs, but they were still serious when they needed to be. As I've mentioned though, that old party did change Frieren in a lot of ways. And in some of those ways, the anime shows you instead of telling you. Psst, spoiler alert. Almost every character in the show is like this. Frieren doesn't make this easy on you at all. I found it very interesting how in the montages when she's alone after she splits from Himmel, she isn't smiling or anything. Yet when she revisits Himmel 50 years later, she wears the biggest smile on her face. Even before she was aware of it, the group had changed her to want companionship. Now that she's with someone new, she doesn't want that same regret to happen again. So despite knowing that she'll probably outlive Fern, she tries to understand her. She tries to take into account her feelings. She tries to give her gifts, and even if Fern thinks she doesn't understand her, the fact that Frieren is even trying is massive growth for her. She also is more open to helping people, such as Sein, whom she saw the old her in, and Lorien and Kane, almost becoming their teacher during the magical exam. Himmel said to live is to be remembered, to change/impact someone's life in a way, even if it's small, and to just appreciate the time you have at the moment. Frieren begins to take on this mindset, and while she's far from the person Himmel was, again, she's trying. Because of that, and other things that I mentioned before, I think Frieren is a very compelling character to follow for a show with messaging like this. Both with her race as an elf, since her concept of time is so much more expanded than ours, and her relationship with magic, and just an apathetic girl slowly finding the want for companionship. Now, Fern was a character I needed a little more time with, since again, she's a character that isn't spelled out to you, and unless you look deeper, you won't be able to see why so many people, including myself, love her as much as we do. Fern might honestly be my favorite character in the show. We see her develop from a child to a teen to a young adult throughout the show, and it'll be interesting to see how she develops past this point. When it comes to her relationship with Frieren and Stark, Fern often plays the mature type, the mother of the group, so to speak. So there are moments where Fern acts strict with her elven grandmother and her soon-to-be boyfriend, but there are multiple points in this story where Fern acts childish and stubborn. She would take care of Frieren's basic needs and will condemn Stark for minor stuff like staying up late, but immediately becomes pouty and upset over pretty trivial matters, completely contradicting her mother act. I'll actually go as far as to say Fern is the least mature one of the group, and it's subtly told to us through her actions. Fern's the quickest to judge anyone, especially Stark. I actually think she's projecting with Stark a lot of the time, constantly calling him a pervert for no real reason, when she was the one who looked at his dick the minute she got that see-through clothes spell. She even called out my homeboy Kraft when they just met. She also struggles with confrontation, mostly because she struggles with her feelings and doesn't know how to talk to someone her age. All these things I listed may make Fern out to be a bit of an obnoxious character to some, but if you're like me, you can appreciate these negatives because this is what makes Fern feel human. Not to mention her upbringing. The first time Heido met Fern, she was about to kill herself as a child after losing her parents and becoming a war orphan. Then she grew up in the woods where she probably hardly had any real human interaction except for with Heido, especially with those around her age. Then she ended up losing Heido at a young age, and now her parent is Frieren, someone who struggles with understanding human emotion and up until recently wasn't really interested in having an apprentice at all. Beneath the incredible mage talent and adult-like mannerisms, Fern is still a child suffering from a whole lot of trauma. She tries to play the adult but doesn't really understand what that's like, and deep down is less of an adult than even Stark because Fern doesn't seem to understand her emotions. And if she does understand her emotions, she can't convey them in a healthy way to the people around her, which I think is completely fine for a teenager growing up. The way she treats Stark is normal because that's probably the first person her age she's interacted with. And it's not like she hates Stark or anything, she just doesn't know how to talk to him. I gotta give it to the writing of this show, as they managed to make two characters, Frieren and Fern, from the same archetype, yet make them completely feel different as characters. Fern feels a lot like Frieren simply because she's basically her child, but these little moments of childishness show that despite being a prodigy mage who's naturally gifted, she's still just a child desperately still wanting Haito's approval. Someone who used up all of her passion early in her life to become a mage so that Haito wouldn't worry about her, and now that she's an actual fully fledged out mage, she lacks a goal to follow. Plus, she's also surprisingly sweet when you look past all of her outside stuff. She cares a lot for her friends and likes seeing them happy. The whole reason she likes collecting magic with Frieren is because she likes seeing her happy. And that is why Fern is best girl, and maybe my favorite character in the show. She's a human character that I loved seeing grow as a person, and I can't wait to see how she progresses past this point. Especially with her low-key but also high-key boyfriend. I agree, Sein. I agree. I freaking love Stark, dude. I had an absolute blast watching him, and it kills me he got sidelined in the second half during the magic exam arc. Stark is the protege of Eisen, and like him, is ridiculously strong. Eisen actually leaves Stark behind because he's scared of Stark's strength, and multiple times does it show us that Stark isn't even aware of his power. Like when we first meet him, he's creating a valley into a mountain, or when he one-shots the dragon he was so scared of, showing us that he could have always been the hero the village saw him as, but he was never confident and was always scared. I was initially worried that Stark would have just been a coward who lucked his way into this situation by sheer chance. I do like those kinds of characters, but with how well done Frieren and Fern were, having just a coward character wouldn't have done much for me. However, Stark isn't a coward, or at least not in the way you'd expect. But first, let's talk about Eisen, since a lot of Stark's character comes from him. He's a strong dude, but he still faced fear like a normal person. Courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the assessment that something else is more important than fear. A warrior isn't one who pretends he isn't scared, it's one who can stand up regardless of fear and fight through it. And that was who Eisen was, and is someone Stark is slowly becoming as well. He shows his fear, and he admits that he's afraid, but he still fights to protect the ones he loves, even against opponents way stronger than he is. He's also a hard worker. The dude has low-key been having a training arc in almost every city he goes to. Honestly, Stark would be a great shonen protagonist. He's oddly similar to Himmel in the sense that he makes an impression on everyone he meets. And it's not like he was born particularly gifted, he was always sidelined for his older brother who did have those natural talents that he didn't. It was his hard work and passion that got him here. He never quits, even against people stronger than he is. He and Fern are similar in that way. And when it comes to his relationship with the party, he is a natural foil to Fern and Frieren, a comedic relief to the usual dry humor between the two girls. But he's so much more than just a foil to me. He's a strongly written character in his own way, whose only issue is that he barely gets screen time compared to the girls. Honestly, fighters as a class get sidelined in the show a lot. Mages have this whole complex system with growth and development over time. Fighters are still pretty much the same. I get Stark isn't the focus, but as a Stark fan, I would like to see him be more of a focus in non-slice-of-life scenes, since I think his character should have a lot more spotlight. Regardless, he's still a fun character. His cowardice isn't annoying, it's understandable and human, and his personality is that of a normal teenage boy, one who also struggles to talk with girls like with Fern. I'm interested to see where he goes once he figures out how strong he truly is. Of course, one of the members of the main party for a little while was Sein, who's another example of every character having their own story. Sein is someone who desperately wanted to be an adventurer, but never had the courage to follow his dream, choosing instead to become a priest for his brother, as he assumed his brother abandoned his own dream to become a higher priest with Haito for him, when in reality his brother stayed behind in this remote little village by choice, while Sein has lived his life in constant regret for not following his childhood friend. which reminded Frieren of herself before she joined the hero's party. Now, it is truly possible Sein believed his brother stayed behind for him for all these years. So I truly think that at some point he began living in ignorance, and that whole brother thing was an excuse so that he could live with his decision. And that slap his brother hit him with was the reality he needed. That's not exactly told to us, and it's mostly my own theory, so that could be wrong, but I really like that. So Frieren ends up convincing Sein to join her party. Yeah, they needed a priest, but this also shows that Frieren was willing to help someone in the exact same way Himmel did for her. It's the effect that Himmel also had on both Heiter and Eisen, which encouraged them to bring people along as well. The main reason I like him is because he fit into the group like a glove, brilliantly playing the group's true adult in the room, a constant mediator for Fern and Stark. Hell, in just a few episodes, he progressed their characters a lot. And he was the only character to end Fern's poutiness by simply speaking to her, not encouraging her with food or something like that. This shows that despite what he may say, Sein is actually a very good priest. But as we've learned from the other adult characters in the show, Sein also had an immature side. He does have a gambling and smoking addiction. And he likes older women. Specifically the mature type, you know, the... There you go. type. Something Frieren is definitely not, which makes their chemistry kinda funny. Sein does end up leaving the group in hopes of finding his childhood friend, but in his limited time he made quite the impression. Again, this showcases Frieren's ability to create memorable, likable characters in the blink of an eye. And in the end, it shows us Sein had a good time with the group. In the end, he misses that ragtag group of kids he had to watch over. I kinda hope we get an update on him at some point in the future. But for now, I really did enjoy Sein's character. I thought he was a great add-on to the party and was just overall a really fun character for me to talk about. Now that the main cast is out the way, I suppose I can talk about some of the side characters who really hit for me. There is a lot, so I'll try to keep these brief. I have to admit, I didn't see the hype with Himmel at first. I'm not the biggest fan of the perfect character type, which Himmel showed a lot of similarities with. One thing that won Himmel over to me was the twist that he's a manufactured hero. He never lifted the sword. It shows that it wasn't some kind of God-gifted talent for him. He's doing this because he's just a nice guy. A regular, normal, but talented dude with a good heart and had enough confidence in himself to tell the world that he was the hero. And he was so talented and left such a noticeable imprint on everybody he met that everyone believes it forever now. Plus, his narcissism and jealousy over Frieren were pretty funny to watch. The show couldn't have been more obvious telling us his feelings for her. It's something I'm assuming he felt from the moment he saw her as a kid. The graceful but quiet elf who saved him before. And those feelings later developed into a romantic interest once he got to know her. And oh, did he try his hardest to get with Frieren. There were so many moments where he tried to hang out alone with her, only for her to reject it. Hell, he practically proposed to her. I also liked his mindset on why he always gets statues, to remind the world that they weren't a fairy tale like what people thought of Flamme. But overall, he represents the idea of time slowly romanticizing a hero over a long period, to the point the real him disappears for the person that was manufactured. We see this all the time in the real world, with the actual heroes we create. Truthfully, we know nothing about them. So it's entirely possible what we know is manufactured just like Himmel was. It also kinda happens with Heiter. In the eyes of Sein, he was a great priest. He had no idea how corrupt Heiter truly was, such as his drinking issue. The perception of someone can change over time depending on the legacy they leave behind. Unlike Flamme, people knew he existed in their world, but they'll only ever know the person created, and not the true Himmel the hero. The one that Frieren loved. Himmel was a pretty fun character to learn about, and I hope we see more of what Frieren saw of him. Speaking of impactful characters, since we all on the topic of humans, let's talk about Flamme for a second, whose name literally means flame, which I found interesting because she is kind of like a flame that sparked the beginning of the age of magic. She taught Frieren everything she knew, and predicted that one day Frieren would regret her apathetic ways. This just shows how smart Flamme was, and this isn't even the only example. There was one scene where they showed her putting a magic barrel around a small plant that would grow into the border surrounding the town that blocks off demons. There's no telling how many lives Flamme saved by doing that small little act. Her and Himmel are very similar in that way. Again, not a character with a lot of screen time, but she's impactful and memorable in her time. Something Frieren exceeds that with characters. I suppose I should get her out the way now, since she is probably the most popular side character in the show. For reasons I don't need to get into here. I am a Christian channel after all. But ignoring that, Weeb was a fun watch. On the surface, yeah, she is a regular old yandere who enjoys killing people, but beyond that, there is an interesting character here. She believes a magic user's spell derives from their personality, so she actually tries to understand / empathize with people and hopes she can understand their power. When she does empathize with someone, she can then copy that ability herself. This unique skill leads to her developing a relationship with Land, a character with a powerful cloning spell. This can also lead to a bit of a catch-22 though, such as with Weeb, whom she sympathized with on the topic of hesitating to kill someone. While this allowed her to use his binding spell, it led to her also hesitating to kill him. Pretty interesting to see that this can get in the way of her normal murderous self. In a power system where imagination is everything, Weeb is so imaginative that she can do shit that normal mages would not be able to, which makes her cutting ability very effective. As long as she believes she can cut through it, regardless of how much mana is in it, she's cutting through it. Again, she's a matchup nightmare, even if she's rather weak when it comes to having actual mana. I also like the fact her reasoning for enjoying killing is as simple as she just enjoys the sound of cutting through things, and her talkative, trustworthy self is a great contrast to Land, who she's mostly around. A quiet, paranoid dude who is so distrustful of the people around him that he walks around as a clone everywhere he goes, even having a backup clone in case that one dies. That spell is so powerful he can effectively never leave the house and hardly anyone would notice. Being so proficient in a spell that's that overpowered makes me wonder just how truly powerful this dude is. Besides that, another one of my favorites from the magic exam was Denkin, who seems to be a pretty high tier imperial mage in this world, but is taking the exam so he can see his widow's grave again. Due to the political issues with the demons that I mentioned before, you have to be a first-class mage to cross the border. So, here he is. I think that's pretty neat, and again, it plays into the messaging of the show. But I mostly enjoy his character due to his personality. He's very wise and cunning, but he's not the ruthless politician you may think he is from his status. He's actually open to working with others and often encourages it. He's also just an entertaining character. Like, he's just kind of funny to watch at times. Plus his character relationships with both Witten and Laufin, as well as basically looking up to Frieren. Honestly, a lot of the character relationships were fun during the magical exam arc. Lauin and Kane are complete opposites who fight all the time. They were just consistently funny to me. I really liked when the party was strategizing and you could still see them fighting in the background. But despite being complete opposites who fight all the time, they trust each other and their powers worked perfectly together because of it. All while Frieren is basically mothering them, which is sweet. Just overall, a lot of fun characters here. Each have unique personalities and backstories that tie beautifully to the show messages. I can't say there was one character that I disliked in this anime. They were all either interesting, relatable, or just straight up fun to watch. This show is beautiful, man. I've always said that despite being a pretty done-to-death genre, when done right, fantasy anime can visually look like some of the best anime in the modern era, with so much creative freedom. A fantasy world can be as expansive as you want it to be, as unique as you please. And Frieren is another example of a fantasy anime that, while grounded in its themes, feels massive and adventurous to explore. Honestly, while this show has a lot of grandiose, flashy action scenes, which I will talk about, it's the little things that sell Frieren for me. I love the little face of realization Frieren does whenever she realizes something from her past. It's subtle, but gives her a lot of character. I mentioned Frieren's expression with others, but also when she's just remembering her time with the hero's party. Some of the only times we see Frieren emote are when she's remembering her time with the hero's party, or when she's with Fern and Stark now. Again, just showing how much her companions mean to her, and how those memories have impacted her and changed her, especially when you compare it to the faces she made during the flashback. Again though, it's not just Frieren. You can pick up these little things subtly with almost every character in the show. One of my favorites is the final moments with Aura, seeing a once confident demon slowly fall into despair at just how inferior she truly was. And in the end, she had no choice but to end her own life at Frieren's command. An ironic end to a character whose whole ability was using her status to order others similarly. She lived and died by her own rule, and I think the show depicts that beautifully, even down to a smooth transition to a POV shot at the end. The show does that a lot as well. Quick, smooth transitions to first-person views. But of course, the flashy bits are good too. Visually stunning, smooth transitions, and well-crafted cinematography and choreography. The way the elements and action just fly around the camera really makes you feel the tension. The dragon fight with Stark, the fights with Lugner and Linnea, the battles with the copies, especially with the Frieren one at the end. Jesus Christ, that might be my fight of the year. The use of colors, such as the purple and red, and the visual effects create so many scenes that just look badass in that fight. And of course, the threatening shot of the Frieren copy at the end. While Frieren has looked pretty threatening in the past, I don't think Frieren has ever looked that threatening in the show up to that point. It's all just so incredible. When you add in the neat power dynamic with mages, it can make for pretty entertaining fights between them. Keiichiro Saito was the director, and if that name sounds kinda familiar, he also directed Bocchi the Rock, another show that took its source material and expanded it to create something better. And there isn't a scene that best shows that improvement in the adaptation than the dance scene between Stark and Fern. The smooth transitions from CGI to 2D, to the fluid character movements and facial expressions, it all comes together beautifully to create a scene that tells a real story to the viewer. And to find out that it was all adapted from one panel really shows his creative genius. He's one of the best in the industry, no doubt about it. There's just so much attention to detail in this anime, it's honestly hard to talk about it all. I feel like I'm missing some stuff. I have to give credit to Madhouse here for not only planning this series out, but also executing it perfectly as well. It feels like every scene was crafted with utmost care and love. Even the montages have such amazing camera work and character movement. Then of course, there's the art, with its great character designs and its serene backgrounds that beautifully match the sound and story of the show. That also really excels. The character designs themselves are simple and memorable. Designs like Yubel, Siri, Land, more minor characters beautifully showcase their character traits. Yubel's eyes, for example, were noticeable to me. It makes me feel uncomfortable almost. Say the use of color in each of the designs is pretty nice too. Frieren means frozen, so having white mostly in her design just works very well. Same with Stark, which means strong, which kinda fits with his red design, a color that means courage and passion. Two words perfect for Stark. Meanwhile, Fern is a lot more put together than the two others. I actually noticed her clothing, which seems to be a mix of both her mom and her dad. I made color references for Stark and Frieren, but I can't say much about Fern's purple. Perhaps someone with more of an art major could inform me, but Fern means distant, and I couldn't find much that connects that with purple, unfortunately. Perhaps it has to do with the purple color theory, since she is both courageous but also calm. I'll be real, I don't know with her. Flamme uses orange, Himmel, which means heaven, so having light blue works well as his want for peace and whatnot. I also really liked Lauren's and Kane's design being complete opposites. That was really fun. Lauren uses a cooler blue color with dresses that show her colder exterior, even if she doesn't like it, while Kane uses a hotter color with more welcoming clothing, as she is the more emotional and fun of the two. I feel like you guys get the point. The designs were really well crafted and memorable for each. The soundtrack for this show was done by Evan Carr, who's quite the vet at this point. I think most of the music is solid enough and very fantastical sounding. I'm no musical expert, but I'm sure you all know what I mean by fantastical sounding. Sounds like shit you'd hear in like a fantasy game or something. There were times when the music really got going during some of the action scenes, which made them feel intense as all hell. They also had a really good song during the picture montage. I don't know what the name of that track is. I might be able to find it when I do research after this, but it is a pretty good song. I'd recommend listening to it. The thing most people talk about when it comes to the music in Frieren is the opening. Specifically, the first one, done by Yoasobi. I remember there being a fair bit of division when the OP first came out, with a lot of people saying how it didn't fit the vibe of the show. Personally, I'm kinda in between on it. It's not as good as their previous work. It's not a track I dislike either. But I can see where people are coming from with this critique. I only really became a fan of this OP when we started getting into the Aura arc. I think it fits the show much better during that portion. While the lyrics relate to the themes of the show, I feel sonically a slower paced OP would fit a lot better. One with more ambience and serenity. Something like Violet Evergarden, for example. But again, it's not like I don't like the OP or anything. It's a cool little track. I just think it could have probably been better, which I think is what people are trying to say with that one. This is something I do think works for the ending of this anime done by Millet. Both verses not only beautifully convey the feelings Frieren shows in the actual anime, but they are also sonically gorgeous. I mean, Millet is the queen with stuff like this, but this song is just on a whole other level. When I was listening to the full track for the first time, I genuinely felt emotional listening to the lyrics. And that powerful build up to the chorus with Millet's vocals? Oh my god, y'all. Oh my god. I don't know if this is a hot take, but I actually prefer the second opening compared to the first one. It's not my favorite, but you know, it's still good. I'm still waiting for an OP that really wows me from Frieren. All of the truly great anime have at least one, so overall the music for this anime is solid. The background tracks can make a scene feel tense, such as the songs used for the action scenes, while also being beautiful backdrop for the more important scenes. And I like the touch of having no music play when Himmel dies, so it puts the incredible vocal performance on display. Speaking of, I get to talk about Atsumi Tanezaki again. Atsumi is one of my favorite voices in anime because of her huge range in vocal variety. For example, a performance similar to Frieren could be Vivi, who's another apathetic character slowly feeling human emotions for the first time. However, she can also voice a character like Arisa from Fruits Baskets, someone who wears her emotions on her sleeve, which is completely different from both those characters. And then she can also voice Anya, a literal child, and play that role perfectly. It's not rare to see a seiyuu have so much diversity in their casting. Kana Ichinose, who's Fern's voice, is someone who can also do this very well. To be honest, most vets can do stuff like this, but Atsumi is on a whole other level to me. She does it so perfectly every time that it feels hard to believe it's just one person often. I think she played Frieren very well. Frieren is smart and wise, but she's also silly. And she can also be cool and unforgiving, especially around demons. And I think Atsumi showed all those sides of her great. Since I brought her up earlier, Kana Ichinose did great too. I also liked the voice actor for Stark, Chiaki Kobayashi. I like how he was able to replicate Stark's nervousness into his lines. At times, he really does sound terrified. I also like how his voice for Stark is cowardice, but not annoying. It can be a tough line to follow to voice a character like that and not make him obnoxious to the viewer. I actually liked all the casting here, to be fair. There wasn't a voice that I thought didn't fit the character at all. And they're all experienced voice actors, so you know what you're getting is high quality. Frieren is something else, man. I'm having a hard time summarizing my thoughts because there's just so much to this anime that I love. I probably titled this video something like How Frieren is Life-Changing or something like that. This is an anime that can have that effect on you. We as humans often forget how fleeting time truly is and how easily we can miss moments that could have changed our lives. Those moments we spend inside instead of hanging out with people. Hell, I'm probably doing that right now, editing and writing this review in the prime years of my life. And while I am young, there have been moments where I look back and realize I could have done more. Frieren is telling you to take this time to spend with others, to live your life more freely, because that time will end before you know it. And it's better to look back at your life and smile, rather than wonder what it could have been. Whether you're a 1,000-year-old elf or not. Thank you for watching this video. This is probably an absurdly long review, and I don't want to take up any more of your time. I'm Kikaya, and thank you for your time.
Do 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 do.